Okay.
So we ready?
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. So to kind of get things started, I'll reintroduce myself for anyone new. My name's Paige Swanson. I'm a senior developer at a company called Abrigo, a financial software services company. So I develop web applications on a day-to-day basis, and I do stuff like this kind of like professionally. But this series in particular, we're focusing on building apps. So what's required to do that? What kind of resources are out there for doing that? And how do you kind of approach this topic as being someone new to it? So I try to give some detailed outlines as to some of the different challenges that come up or some of the different things that you'll need to get started. And hopefully gives you a little more confidence to kind of take charge of things on your own if you feel kind of inclined. But otherwise, if you're just here to like learn, hopefully this is good for that. You can just kind of see some new things in case you happen to be interested in that. So as a quick start, let me again just make sure I'm only showing everything that I actually need, not stuff that I don't need. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and everyone should be able to see this now. I have a code editor up here, but what I'm going to do is pull up the notes that everyone can follow along. And when I was referring to like the previous notes, I meant this section here. So if you click table of contents, it'll take you to all of these. And just another brief reminder, if you go to the top level of this, it's called Library App Starter. So the URL is just github.com/PageSwanson/Library App Starter. If you scroll down here, you can see my contact email. So if you ever have any questions that you want to ask me, you can email me at this address, and I can try to answer any questions that you have via email. And if you want to ask me questions remotely, like in a video call, you can go to this site where you can sign up for office hours. I have office hours every Monday from 6:30 to 8:30. So please don't hesitate to sign up there. I really enjoy hosting those, and hopefully can help you with any like questions or problems or like just coding sort of challenges or interesting pieces of code or projects that you want to talk about. So always happy to jump in there. But we're going to be working from here, this table of contents. We'll click here for today's notes. So we've kind of talked a lot about like installing prerequisites and tools and using code editors and getting started with the development framework or the development kind of like approach that we want to use for building our app. And so now I wanted to, with the last couple of sessions, or possibly the last session might be today, I'm not sure, depending on how far we get, we might do one more to talk a little bit more about JavaScript. But today I really want to talk about, like making a simple app, how to like approach it, with in terms of like, designing the app itself. So won't be so much about a lot of what we've already covered, which is, what do we need to make an app? What are all the tools involved? But this is much more about, okay, if I have an app idea, how do I like approach doing that with some of these tools? Okay, so I had a pretty simple idea for an app that could be useful to some of you. I'm not sure how useful, but I could see some uses for something like this. So I had an idea for like a simple counter. So maybe this would be useful if you had something you wanted to keep track of, like the number of people entering a building or something like that. Or perhaps if you're playing a card game, you want to keep track of points. Something like where you have a number that you want to keep track of. Maybe it's not too big, but you don't want to have to remember it all of the time. So here we have kind of some things we'd want to keep track of with this app. We have a count, okay? We have an increment, meaning like a plus. So we're going to increment the number, increase the number. And then we have a decrement. So we're going to decrease the number or minus. So these are things we'd want to be able to tap or touch with our fingers in the app. And then we have a reset. So we want to be able to reset the number maybe to like 0 when we click this, so that the number goes all the way back down to where we started. And then some stretch goals, this would be kind of like maybe a homework if you really take off and decide that you want to make this app. Though I don't know, we'll get to it today. We have like a little icon here, which I just made it like a plus, but this might be so we can add an additional count, so we can run sort of multiple counts at the same time in our app. We want to keep track of multiple numbers. And then this way we could delete a count if we no longer care about keeping track of that number. So I didn't really figure out, sort of like what this would look like what happens when you click this. Does it just swipe over to another page? These are things maybe we can talk about or imagine what those things would look like. But the main objective here today is really just this stuff right here. So we're gonna try to lay out the app first. We're gonna figure out how to approach our layout. Like if we want a layout that looks like this, how do we get there? And then we're going to try to add these individual components onto our app page. Okay, so that's what we'll talk about first. We'll talk about the application layout. So we have an image in mind, the one I just showed above. Okay, so we can now kind of choose a layout for our application based on this image. So from here, we're going to go to our layout documentation. If you've been in the previous sessions, you've been exposed to this documentation, but I provided a link for it. We talked about last session specifically all of the different layouts available for us. Depending on the kind of app you want to make, there's different layouts you can choose from. So I just clicked this link here, and I'm opening this other tab to look at this specific layout that's being used in this application. So here's some layout code. This code describes an application layout, and I'm going to kind of break down what this code consists of and what it's trying to say about the layout of our application. And of course, I'll show you where that code belongs if you have a template application set up, which isn't too hard to do if you follow the instructions from previous sessions. You can get there. And if you have trouble doing that later on, I encourage you to come to office hours and we can get you set up with a template application. So, but in the meantime, we're taking a look at layouts in particular. So I linked this particular type of layout. It's a grid layout with what's called star sizing. Star sizing lets us do what's called like responsive design. Basically, this means that if the size of our screen or the size of our phone screen changes, if we want to run the app on one phone and then we run the app on a phone with a bigger screen, we don't want the app to look smaller. We don't want it to look as though the app is inside of the screen and it's always the same size no matter what. We want it to change or respond with the different screen size available to us. So this is called responsive design. And the way we do this with our grid layout is we use these stars. So I'll try to break down what's happening here in this grid layout. But I think maybe the best way to do it is to actually check it out inside of our app. So as you can see, we have a couple of items inside of our grid layout, which are placed, kind of sequentially. And they each have a row and a column specification. So what we're going to try to do is actually, we're going to imagine, again, the layout we have in mind, which has these two sort of buttons and this count and then this reset button for now. We might go ahead and add these even if we don't need them to function yet. We can add these independently and see how they might be included in our layout. So I like the grid layout in particular because I can kind of imagine in my head, if I just had a couple more grid items here, right, another box or something, and then a box in the center, and then one to the right of this one, and then some below, I would have pretty much the layout that I'm looking for right here. So I can think of this as a grid. So I chose this layout because I can kind of see that in my head, but we'll try to execute on that and figure out if we can get a similar layout going using this grid layout system. Okay. So following along with some of my notes here, it looks like we're going to need 3 rows to kind of execute the layout that we have above. So the 3 arrows, the 3 rows described in this layout would be this top row with the X and the plus. So to add a new count and then to delete a count, this would be the top row. So the first one, and then the second row would contain our minus and our plus button and our count. Okay, and the third row contains our reset button. So we're going to need those 3 rows. And I kind of described how we would kind of figure out the size of each of those rows based on some of our requirements. So we want the count to be pretty big. We want it to look pretty big. So it should probably be double the height, of some of these other rows. So this row and this row should be half the height of this row. So if we're getting into the code, what that's going to look like is we're going to use these stars. This kind of indicates like a base row. So this indicates like 1 by 1 sort of row height. Or sorry, just a 1 unit row height. And then I'm putting the 2 here to indicate that it should be double the height of just a typical row, relative to all of the other rows I've included. And if that's getting a little bit too deep, let's just go ahead and try to apply some of this knowledge and see where we can get with it. Okay, so I'm using a code editor here called Atom. I've talked about it in some previous sessions, and I've talked about how to open a project using Atom, and I've talked about how to get started with a blank template. But you can actually go to my the website that I linked before. I'm going to go flip back to these notes here. And if I go back up and I go to just the main page, if you go to Counter App, I actually give you this app with everything you kind of need. This assumes that you've already like set up and installed everything to actually run the app, which I've talked about in some of the previous notes. But it has everything you need, and we're going to be mainly working in here. So if you wanted to follow along like on the website, you could go into Counter App, and then Components, and we're going to click on Home.view. This is where we're going to do all of the work for our counter. So we're going to add the code for the layout. You can see we already have a simple version of the layout here. And eventually we'll add the code to actually make the count go up and down. Okay. So I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to go back to the notes for the time being. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started by adding some rows to our grid layout. So again, I just have the same code here that you were seeing on the site. And then in the background, what I have is a process to emulate our application on sort of a fake phone. So this phone is running on my computer. It's not a real phone, obviously. It's just an application, but it's going to simulate what the app would look like on an iPhone. And this is really useful when you're developing apps. I've talked about setting something up like this before, but for now, I'm just kind of reintroducing it just very briefly. But this is how I'm going to test what the application actually looks like on my phone. And the way I'm going to run that application is using a command line tool, which I've also discussed previously, but this isn't too complicated. I basically just open up on my computer. I open up a window. I navigate to the directory that I'm working on my code in. In this case, I'd opened up Finder. If you're using a Mac, I go over to my documents. I go here. I'm working in the counter app folder. So I would drag that over to this window, and I'd, whoop, a bug. And I paste it here. And then I actually need to go before this. Oops. Close this, and I'd say CD, and that's going to take me there. So all I need to say is CD, and then, like I said, just drag it and drop it, and then that takes me there. So I'm in this folder, and then in my case, what I ran is a command tns run. So this is because I've installed the native script console application, tns run iOS, and I think it's just tns run iOS, and then I'd say emulator. So it means basically run an emulator of iOS or like the iPhone for my app. I'm not going to run it right now because I already have it running in the background, but this is just a demonstration. If you're at some point in the future watching this recording, you need a refresher. That's how I do that. Okay, but I'm going to exit because I already have it running in the background. And you can see I actually ran this command, tns run iOS emulator. And so it's running right now, and what it's doing is basically waiting for me to make changes, and it'll refresh our app whenever we make those changes. So let's go ahead and try to make some changes right now. So I said to begin with, I'm flipping back over to my browser here to look at my notes. I said to begin with that we need 3 rows. We need a count, a row for the count, which is double the height of a typical row. But the top and bottom rows need to be the same height. And that should be clarified. It really just needs to be sort of, whoops, got lost there. Whoops, sorry about that. They basically need to be like 1 unit high. The units don't really matter here. It's kind of arbitrary units. But this is the syntax or the code that we're going to plug in to create these 3 rows. So it's 1 row, it's 1 unit, 1 row that's 2 units, and 1 row that's 1 unit. And these happen sequentially, starting from the top of the application window. So I'm going to go back over to my code, and I'm going to go ahead and make this change. So I'm going to add a row that's double height, and I'm going to add a row that is a single row, and I'm going to save. And in the background, you're going to see the app is going to refresh, and it's going to update with all of my additional rows. Now, I haven't put anything in the rows like you see in this example in our documentation. So the rows, like, they don't have any content yet, so it looks exactly the same as it did before. So what we need to do is actually add some content to the rows so they'll show up. Okay. We can start to add labels. Labels are just basically text elements like this. We can add labels as placeholders in these rows, even if we don't know what we want to put there just yet in terms of like the code. We have an example label here to begin with. So we could basically just make copies of it and put it in the locations that we want for our rows. Before we do that, though, we need to add some columns as well. So just like we wanted 3 rows, whoops, just like we wanted 3 rows, we also need 3 columns, right? So 3 columns for each of these sections here. And remember, we're thinking of this like a grid. So imagine each of these is a cell in the grid. Even the blank space, right, needs to be a cell in the grid. Even though there's nothing here, since it's a grid, we have to imagine that each space is like a block, just like they have going on right here. So you know, some of these grids can get pretty complicated, but you can see some examples where they've doubled up the width of like a column, or they've increased the height of a row, and they've done a little bit more complicated sort of layout work than we're going to do right here, but that's okay. It's just to demonstrate that you can do different grid sizes and different placement. But notice here we have like a similar layout desire, right? We have variable width columns and rows. That's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so if we go back here, what we're going to do now is we're going to add 3 columns. So 1, 2, 3. And actually, this reset button, I'm going to make it part of the same column. So this is the second column. I'm going to go ahead and make it part of the same column because, so just imagine that this reset button edge stops right under the count. And it's in that same column there. It doesn't extend over. So let's go ahead and try to do that. Let's add those columns. So we're going to add the columns in pretty much the same way. So there's going to be 1 column on the left, it's 1 size, and then this is going to have a double width column for the count and the reset button, and then the last column will be for these buttons right here. Okay, so the app is restarting in the background. It's getting our update, and again, it doesn't change anything because you know, our layout, we didn't add any content to those columns. So there is a column here, there's a column here, there's a column here, but we haven't added anything to them. So we need to go ahead and do that now if we want to see what's there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this label. Okay. And I'm just going to add a label for every single element that we want in our application. So I'm going to move this out of the way and take a look at our image again. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different elements. So for now, we're going to just want 6 different labels to kind of represent these elements. Okay, so I'm going to just copy paste this. So we have 6 labels. So this is 3 labels, 4 labels, 5, 6. Okay. Another thing I want to mention is like we have some code in here that's actually generating the message content. You'll notice that the text here that we see in our example actually doesn't say message, it says welcome. We're getting that welcome from this piece of code down below. So in our file, we have a template section. The template describes all of the content in our application. So the columns, the rows, the text. The script describes the functionality of our application. And part of the functionality of this application is to create a message which just displays welcome. So it returns the word welcome. That message is used in this label here. It's okay if that's not fully understood. A lot of the times when you're getting started making an app, you really just need to do simple things. You'll often come across code that you can reference, that you can learn about as you sort of go. But this code is basically using this functionality to display some text. We don't need that. For right now, our count is just going to be a fixed number. Our buttons are just going to be plus and minus signs. Like, we're not going to do anything super complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, which allows us to use the value provided here. Okay, and I'm going to replace the text with just a static, or like an unchanging string or word. So the first one I'm going to use comes from our little layout design here. So it's an X. I'm going to go ahead and put that in X, or we can say close to make it more clear. So just say close. Do the same thing again. Right. This is going to be add. Right. So we're going to add a count at the top. We can even be more explicit and say add count. And these are things we'll want to do later on. But for right now, we're just using text to display it. Okay. So again, we're going to do the same thing. I actually have a little shortcut here in my editor. Oops. That will, I think, let me do this. Can I do it? I don't know if I can. I don't think I can make this any faster. Okay, so we're just going to delete all these v binds first, which is saying bind whatever this is doing to this text. We're getting rid of that. Okay. And then we're replacing each label with what we want from our layout. So the next thing that we want, I'm just going left to right. You can really go however you want. I'll show you how we're going to get them into the correct positions in our grid in a second. So, but I'm just going ahead and filling them in left to right. So now we want a minus, an account, and a plus. I'm going to separate these out, actually. This doesn't change how the code works. You can add as much space as you want. So I'm going to add a minus sign. So I'll just do a minus like that. Oops. And I'll say account. So I'll just do an arbitrary number. Just do the number 222, for example. Do a plus sign. And then I'm going to separate this again to represent our button that we're going to add, our reset button, which is just the word reset. Okay, so now I'm going to save this. And again, I'm saving it. So in the background, our app is going to refresh. Okay. And something silly here kind of happened. So we want our layout to look like this. We added all these elements. We have our columns. We have our rows. But when we generated our app, like it looks like all of the text just like landed on top of itself. Like it didn't lay out the way we wanted. And that's because we actually have to modify these properties right here. So where am I getting all of this instruction? By the way, I'm using the documentation. So I basically, if I wanted to, I could copy this functionality right here, and I could copy it right into my app if I wanted to. And I could see that this same grid would appear. And I would be able to kind of figure out from there, you know, how I wanted my grid to look. But I'm not doing that. I'm just kind of referencing the code as it is right here. So I notice here that the text they're displaying is contained right here. So text, you can see is 0, 0, and look, you can see it appear right there. So if I want my grid items to appear in the same place, I need to add some more what are called attributes to this label. So here I have a row attribute and a column attribute. And basically what I'm saying is I want this label to appear in this row and this column. You'll notice as well that it starts counting from 0. That's a common sort of pattern that you'll see when working with numbers in code. Often we call it indexing from 0. So like if you think about searching through a filing cabinet or something like that, or I'm trying to think of a better example, maybe how, you know, in I don't know, in America, we might have like a ground floor and then like a first floor, a second floor, a third floor. So you could think of the ground floor as 0. However you want to think about it, the first column is going to be 0, and the first row is going to be 0 as well. So knowing what we know now, let's try to actually put these in the correct places. But let's just do one first. So I added column 0 and I added row 0, and I'm saving it. And now I'm going to load the app again. It's reloading. And we'll see here that close has now moved. It's shifted up to the top left, and that's because it's in column 0. So this is column 0. Okay, and this is row 0. So column 0, row 0. And we can even add, like they've done here, if it helps us kind of visualize this, we can add some background colors. These are what are called hex codes, by the way. They're hexadecimal codes for color. I know this probably looks really arbitrary, like how does this mean, you know, light green? But there's a pretty easy tool that we can use to actually figure out this color. Often they're called like color pickers. This is just a side note, but we can open a new tab here. And if you just Google like, you know, something like CSS color picker or something like this. Yeah, Google even has a handy tool for doing this. So it's very, very quick and easy. So, you know, I mean, I like the color green, but I want ours to be a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the kind of like yellows or something like this. I kind of like this yellow. And what I'll do is I'll just copy this hex code. So it's generating a hex code for this particular color. This hex code is basically made up of a red value, a green value, and a blue value. So it's contributions of red, green, and blue for the color to make up this code. So if you're just interested in where that value comes from. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I like this color. And I'm going to take it over here. And just like they did in this example, they have this background color property. I'm going to do something similar in mine. I'm going to say background color equals, and I'm going to paste in the hex code. And I'm going to save. And in the background, this should update again. And hopefully, yeah. OK, so now we can see this filled space that represents our grid cell. So this is kind of nice if you're kind of debugging or you're trying to figure out how the grid actually looks in your app. You can use these background colors to kind of conveniently visualize what your grid looks like in the application. So I'm going to close out of this because I don't really need to figure out exact colors. I'm just going to kind of randomly pick different colors. We just need to see the distinguishing sort of buttons. Okay. So now that we have a good way of visualizing where things in our grid are going to end up, what we can do is continue to lay the rest of the items out in our grid based on our example here, our draft design. And as you can see, this is proving to be pretty useful. So I would highly encourage you to do something like this if you have an app in mind. Draw it out on paper, draw out every possible screen that you can imagine wanting to have, draw out all of your buttons. It'll help you kind of think about functionality. It'll help you think about where things should belong, where things go. And it'll inform your design in a good way, so I really encourage doing this. So let's go back down here. And this is all we're doing, right? We're adding labels as placeholders. This is in the notes. We're going to add one for each element that we expect to have. And again, I remind you to count from 0 to determine the row and column position. So again, let's go ahead and go through this really quick to see if we can finish laying all of these elements out. So for the add count button, let's go back up to our layout. We want it at the top right. So remember, there's a column here, okay, in the middle that we're skipping over. So we're actually going to the last column. So if we're starting from 0 and there's 1, 2, 3 columns, this is column 0, column 1, column 2. For this next one, we're going to say we're in column 2. Okay, and we're actually in row 0, meaning the first, that top row. Okay, so we'll also add a background color. Okay, just like that. And we can keep it the same background color. I'm okay with this background color for this top row. Okay, and moving right along, we have these other labels. This one is the minus sign, so it's going to go like right here. And I can save this, by the way, and the app will update in the background. So let's let that do that while we figure out the rest of this code. So this is going to go on the far left side. You can see that updated nicely. It's going to go on the far left side. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another background color. This time I want it to look a little bit different. I'm just going to pick some random values that I know will kind of like work out. I have no idea really what these are going to look like. I'm not, I don't know anything special. Don't worry. I'm just kind of guessing. I know the color will be different, so that's good enough for me. So we're going to have this minus sign, and it actually needs to go in this left-hand column, just like the close. So I'm going to put it in column 0, and going to row 0, 1, which is the middle row right here. That actually works out. That's where we want it to be. So I'm not going to change that. Now we can kind of quickly do the other ones, right? So the count itself, which is in the middle, and the plus sign, which is on the right. So starting from 0, we actually want it to be in 0, 1, so column 1. This is already correct. And we want it to be in row 0, 1, so row 1. So this is also correct. So we can just leave this alone. And of course, we can add a background color. Maybe we'll add a unique one just to keep track of it. So I'll add like F here and maybe a C. Again, no idea what that's going to look like. Let's go ahead and take a look while we work, just to see that we've not made any like mistakes, but also just to check out our colors. Okay, so our colors, I don't like this middle one because it doesn't look super different to me. Let's add another E here and see what that looks like in the background. The way I know what letters to be using, oh, that still doesn't look good enough for me. Let's do a D here. The way I know what letters to be using is hexadecimal digits. Each hexadecimal digit, unlike a decimal digit, which goes from 0 to 9, hexadecimal digits go from 0 to F. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it goes A, B, C, D, E, F. It's not something you really need to know, but it's an interesting piece of knowledge, I guess. So if you're trying to pick colors, you can't say G. That's not going to work. You can't say F. So we'll do another F. I still don't like this color, but I'm going to move on because we're no need to spend time on this. Okay, that's different enough. I mean, it looks weird, but it gets the point across. So we have our minus sign. We have our little count, which is still being overlapped by the rest of these labels. So let's go ahead and fix those. So for the plus sign, we want it to be to the right. And by the way, if you have any questions, I check the Q&A, and Celeste will be checking the Q&A or the chat. So feel free to chat anything, any questions that you have. I'll check it. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. Otherwise, you can come in my office hours every Monday and you can ask questions there too. Okay, so let's go ahead and move this one. We know it's in the same row as the count and the minus sign. So text minus sign, text 222. So we want it to be in the same row, but we want the column to be the furthest one. So 2, column 2. And then let's give this the same background color actually as the minus sign, since it's doing something pretty similar functionally. Okay, so pasted that, and then I just copied and pasted this value, by the way. Last thing we have to do is do the reset button. So the reset button goes right under the count, and it goes right here. So let's put it in column 1, which it already is. Obviously, it's overlapping our count, so we know that it's in the right column, at least. But the row is wrong. You need to go in the last row. So it's the only thing in the last row. And again, let's give it a unique background color. I want to make it a little bit, I think this will make it darker. I don't really remember, to be honest, but that's okay. So I saved, it's updating in the background. Let's see how it looks. The colors look terrible. They don't really make a lot of sense, but the layout is now getting really close to what we want, right? This looks pretty good. So we have the count in the middle. We have the increment, we have the decrement, and we have the reset button. And then we have the add count at the top, and then we have the close at the top left. So this is getting like pretty close. It's getting like really, really close to what we want. We followed our instructions, and I just included a picture here. I did a little bit differently earlier just to make sure things were working. I just included the words, but this is also clear. So, I just wanted to show you kind of, an example so that if you were working on it at home, you weren't watching this recording, that you could kind of like follow along. So we have our placeholders, we have our grid laid together. we can now kind of move on to maybe making some of these things look a little more like what we want them to look like. So like these things look okay, the plus and the minus, but they do need to be buttons. This reset does need to be a button, so it needs to look a little more like a button. Basically, all this stuff needs to be buttons, and then maybe we want this count to be a little bit bigger text-wise. Maybe we want some larger text. So we can start to work on some of those things and figure out kind of like how that's how that is going to work. Is there anything else I wanted to mention before we kind of do that? Yeah, I think everything here kind of makes sense so far. I think it looks, decently okay. And again, all I did was just sort of follow the grid pattern. Oops, lost my mouse. All I did was kind of follow the grid pattern and kind of figured out things from there. So the next thing we'll want to do is start using elements. This is an element. This label is an element. Grid layout is an element. So this element contains all of these elements here. The way I know that is because of this. So this grid layout, it has this little thing that's called a closing tag. This thing is called a closing tag. This / indicates that this is the end of this element. So inside of it, we have all these labels. Okay, so just clarifying that. So for a couple of these, we want to make them, we can go ahead and start making them buttons. So how do we do that? We can go ahead and hop over to our documentation page again. If you're curious, the way I get to this documentation page, if you just kind of delete all this stuff. Whoops. Uh-oh, what did I do? Try this. If you just go to nativescriptview.org, I have it bookmarked. You click docs. This will take you to this page. In the native script view documentation, they have a lot of the elements that you would need, that you'd want to use, generally speaking. They have pretty much everything that you probably want to use in your application. And they have stuff like buttons and things. So let's go ahead and click this button. And let's see what it looks like, what's involved in kind of using a button. So the documentation indicates that we have code that's going to look like this. So it has the text for the button itself. In iOS, it's going to kind of look like this, and in Android, it's going to kind of look like this. Yeah, so we have the button text, and then we have the function of the button, which we're not going to talk so much about today. We'll hopefully talk about that maybe next time. Yeah, we have the text for the button, which we already have in our existing layout here. So let's go ahead and replace this label with a button. It's also going to talk about styling the button. And you can make it like disabled by saying whether the button is enabled or not. And then here it's talking about, when we decide to actually have this button do something, how can we make the button do something? We're going to use this tap attribute. All of these are would be called attributes. So these are attributes here. Okay, but let's go ahead and replace what we have with the button. So we're going to say button instead of label. Okay, class. We're going to say button for the class. The reason is because we have some things called styling rules that require us to add this little attribute here. I talked a little bit about that in the last session, where we wanted to include our own customized CSS rules or styles in a separate sort of like file. This is all included on the website with the application code. My copy of it is right here. This custom CSS. So basically what I'm doing is in my application, I'm loading my custom CSS with this line. I added the custom CSS file from the NativeScript website. If you want to look into how that's actually done, you can take a look at the notes from the last session. But it basically includes all these little rules like, oh, if you have a slider, then the background color should be this. And you see this familiar hex code. If you have a progress bar or something, you need to have this color. Okay. So we need to reference all of these rules with, oh, sorry about that. It's kind of loud. We need to reference all of these rules with what's called classes. So that's what we're doing here. In fact, if we open this custom file up again, we can search in here for button. Oh, and there's actually, I don't see the word button in here. Is there really not? Oh, well, I guess all buttons just by default will look fine. So we won't worry about it then. Or maybe they're called BTNs. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. In this case, they're called BTNs. So good to know. So we can have like a button primary and a button outline and things like this. So let's go ahead and make it just a button, a BTN. BTN. And I went ahead and saved it. And we'll kind of see what happens with our button. Okay, so it changed a little bit, and now it's clickable. Now it doesn't do anything when we click it. Nothing's going to happen. I'm also going to get rid of the background color because I think our button class gives us a background color, which is going to kind of make it look a certain way. Yeah. So this is now clickable. You know, it has its own little animation and everything when we tap it. This is emulating the tap functionality. So we now have this button. It doesn't do anything, but it is a button and it's there. Okay. So get that out of the way. So let's go ahead and do that for any other buttons that we want to have. So we want this add count to be a button eventually as well. Make it a button. We'll delete the background color because we don't need that anymore. We already figured out our layout. It looks good. The reset is also going to be a button. And I'm going to make it a button primary from these rules that you saw in here. There's also these outlines. I think we can just add the button outline. We'll see what that looks like. I'm actually not sure what it's going to look like, but I'm not sure if it's actually going to do what I want it to do. Maybe we'll do like this, actually. Button rounded large. That seems more like what we want. Okay. Let's do that. Let's save it and let's delete the background color again. We don't need the background color. We're going to use our button styles to kind of handle the colors for us. Okay, so now we have this button. It's rounded. It doesn't really look rounded to me, but oh, whoops, I didn't. You don't want to keep this period. This period here means that I'm going to be using classes. So these class attributes will be used to refer to the rule I have listed here. If we got rid of this, it would mean that I'm using just an element to refer to this rule. So I do have a couple element rules, right? In here I have label. So anything that is like a label in here, it'll automatically get some of these rules, anything that's a label. That's just a quick differentiation. It's okay if it's not super obvious or clear, but that is what I'm doing when I do this stuff. So whoops, didn't need to do that. Put that back. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to reference this rule again and save it and see what happens when it reloads. This is already starting to look a little bit better. Yeah, okay, great. So this is a really big button. I don't know if I like exactly how that looks, but it's not the worst. I'm okay with it. I think it looks kind of interesting. Looks maybe like we'd want some padding there on the bottom. I can show how to do those things maybe in the next couple of minutes if we have time, if we figure out these buttons. which will probably also look a little goofy, but I kind of like how stuff looks so far. It's kind of interesting. Also, we need to update this with the button style so it looks just like the close. And now what we're going to do is finish off these labels. So I'm going to get rid of the background color on these two so that it looks like the rest of our app sort of theme. Get rid of that. And really, these also need to be buttons. Oops. But maybe we'll make, what other kind of buttons do we have going on here? We have normal sort of primary buttons. We have button outlines. Not really sure what that will do. Let's see. We have small rounded buttons. Let's see what that's going to look like. So we'll make it a primary button, but they'll be small. So SM. And then we'll replace this with an SM. So we're just referencing that rule that we have in our CSS. And we'll kind of throw that in to make these buttons look a little bit different because they are for incrementing and decrementing our count, which we haven't implemented yet, but we're trying to get our layout all set up to begin with. Okay, cool. So they didn't end up looking that different from the large rounded button. I'm not sure why that is, but I kind of like how they look still. Oh, I guess they look a little bit different. The rounding is a little bit different. You see this rounding is a lot wider. It's kind of cool. The layout looks not exactly what I had in mind, but that's why we're going to do a few more things, or we would do a few more things to make these buttons look a little bit smaller. Currently, they're filling the whole grid cell. We don't necessarily want that to happen all the time. And we would probably want to make this count a little bit bigger. We can try to do a couple of those things by adding CSS rules right inside of this file to make things go a bit faster. I can also remove this theme because it's not even being used. If I save that, I don't think that'll break things. Hopefully not. Whoops. Error. Uh-oh, what error do I have? Do I still have an error? I don't. Oh, it doesn't like our remove this import statement. Not sure why. Oh, okay, I know why. Because I have to just delete this basically. That's okay. We can probably leave it, maybe. No, yeah, we'll delete it, but we'll say it's red or something like that. Okay, don't worry too much about that. Oh, I see. The red. There we go. There we go. Okay, that should work. But we don't even need this style. I just want to make sure I didn't break anything. Okay, so what I was doing there is modifying the existing styles we already had. We don't need those styles. You saw here, actually, this is another class, right? Like this looks a lot like, if we hop back over to our custom CSS file, this looks a lot like this here, or sorry, this, like slider, dot progress, this kind of thing. This looks really similar. It's just a custom rule that we've made saying, hey, anything with this class, right? Which there's nothing with this class, so that's why I'm deleting it. It should be colorized red. So I'm just getting rid of this, and we're going to add our own style. Since we're running a little bit short on time, I'll just add one for font size. So what I want is this. I want this count to be bigger. I think it's a little too small. It looks kind of puny. with all these really big buttons surrounding it. So what I'm going to do is add a class, which I haven't created yet, but I'm going to reference. I'll call it counter count. You can put hyphens in classes like this one. And I'm actually going to make a custom rule for it right here. I'm going to say, okay, dot, because it's a class, counter count. Okay, and you open a rule, you begin a rule with these braces. And we're going to say font size. It's actually recommending me this. And we'll say 12, because these are the units that we kind of need to use. We can say EM actually, I think. These are the units we use when we write CSS. So we're going to take a look and see what it looks like. It actually looks a little bit smaller, so I'm going to up the size to 22 EM. Let's take a look now and see if it looks any better. Okay, it does. So it's starting to look a lot better. That number's getting bigger. Let's go ahead and up it to something a little more substantial, like 32. And I feel like that's going to be a good range. That number is going to look pretty big. Yeah, I think that's good. Just for good measure, I'm going to just stick to 40. So we've already done like a lot of stuff. This app is actually starting to like come together. It's looking way more like what we set out to kind of make. We've got our button. Some of these things, you know, the spacing's not quite right, but that's something we can work on using more CSS rules. If you decide to resume from here, like if you get interested in doing something like this, you know, you can always Google around pretty easily to find things like spacing and stuff like this, but I'll show you a couple more really quick. And sorry if we're going over time, you know, feel free to drop out. I don't want to hold anyone over. All of this code, I'm going to upload it. So if you can't stick around, that's totally fine. It'll be uploaded. So the example code, again, can be found right here. If you go to Counter App, you go to App, Components, Home, all the stuff we're adding, I'm going to make an update. So it'll include all this stuff. And it'll include the CSS rule that we're adding here. So all of the code that we've written today will be included. So you can reference it later if you want. So just jumping back to our notes really quick, I'm just going to make one final little addition just to kind of show you an example of how we can start to make this button look a little more reasonable. So I think this will work, but you know, I'm trying something new myself here. So you know, I didn't exactly know how this was going to come out and look, but I kind of like the way it looks. I just want this to be, this button, I want it to be a little bit smaller. I just think it looks a little too big. When we want to make changes to the way things look, how much space things take up, that doesn't affect our layout, right? So like, we're not going to change where the reset button is. We're just going to change how much space it occupies. That's a good task for CSS. So CSS is great for that. And I make some notes about this actually, which I'll just kind of follow right now. So we're out here. We've already done our layout. We've added the elements ourselves. So I want to just even change the icon size. So it's good to know. I just wanted to clarify that when we use the layout system, like the grid layout, this component or this element, this grid layout, we're deciding or we're specifying how our content is organized. But what we don't want to do is then use CSS, right? These CSS rules to start changing the position or again, the layout of items. That would conflict with what we just did, the work we did here. Okay, so really just keep in mind, if you want to change like where the reset button is, go back to your layout and try to do it there. Like don't try not to use CSS to do something like that because you'll get conflicts. Let's just really quickly try to adjust though as a last step. Let's try to adjust how this reset button looks. Let's try to make it a bit smaller. So let's say counter reset as a new class. Okay, it's not referenced yet, but we'll go ahead and reference it up here. So we'll copy the name. And to our last button here, this reset button, go ahead and add another class. So it has 3 classes. It has button primary, it has button rounded large, and it has counter reset. So counter reset is our special class we're adding right here. These other classes came from our custom CSS file, which I demonstrated how to add in the last session. Okay, so counter reset. What do we want this to do? Well, I happen to know about this concept in CSS that we can use, we can take advantage of. And I can even pull up some documentation on it really quick. I like to use this site called MDN. It's the Mozilla Development Network. It's a very useful tool for learning about CSS, about HTML, about JavaScript. And some of these things will apply for us. So we can use this concept of padding. Padding is a really useful tool. It basically is going to define, it describes the space between the content and the border of like an element. So padding describes kind of like this region here. So like this white space here, that's the padding. And this is the border of our element. This is our element, and this is the padding. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to adjust the padding so that basically the content takes up less space inside of this big box. So we're going to try to do something similar. I think we can pull it off. If we don't, that's okay. I'll make sure to just get it uploaded no matter what. And we're going to try to do padding top. And what we're going to do is add a little bit of padding above the button so that it's not so big. Now, I don't know how much offhand we want to add, but let's just try 10 EM. EM is a unit. It's basically a relative unit. You can kind of think of it like it's how these stars work. Okay, so that did not do much of anything that I can tell. Let's try to add a dramatic value. And let's just do a fixed value, actually, which should be available to us. Let's see what happens. Ah, okay. I see. So it's actually moving the text inside of the cell itself. So what we may need instead is a margin. Let's try that. Let's see if that's going to work. Not sure if it will, but okay, that is what we need. So we needed a margin. So a margin is kind of similar to padding, except what it's going to do is it's going to take this this element and kind of squish it down. It's going to squish around the element. So it's going to add space between the next element above, to the sides, and below it. So it's different in that way from padding. Actually, there's a really good resource for this MDN box model that I kind of keep in mind. And I'll go ahead and link it in the notes. I'll update the notes so we can take advantage of this resource because it's really helpful for understanding. It's really helpful for understanding how to use padding, when to use margin. Let's go ahead and keep it there. Okay, so there's this idea of the box model when using CSS. And it helps us to describe what's actually happening with these elements. Oh, whoops. With these elements and how they take up space and how to describe the space in terms of CSS. And this is kind of basically what we're dealing with. So we have, I wonder if there's, well, this is pretty good. I like this one. Okay. So you have margin, which is outside of each box or element. You have the border, which is the border of the element itself. You have the padding, which is inside of the element, but outside of the content, which would be like text in this case. And you have the content itself. The content itself is like, in our case, the text. So like in this element, right, this would be the content, is the word button. This would be the padding. So the padding is like this gray space. The border for this element would be like this outer area. And then this would be the margin. But in this case, maybe the margin isn't super visible because we don't know how big the element is because we don't have like a background color. Let's try to add some margin around our element. to get it to look as like a last step, last thing to do today. Let's add finally. So we got it to look good on the top. Now let's let it get it to look good on the bottom. So let's try to do a margin of 20 on the top. Whoops, sorry. Margin of 20 on the top, and then a margin bottom of 20 as well. And these are just like different units. It's not super important. You just experiment with them, play around till you get what you like. And this is starting to look a lot better to me. I really liking much more how this looks. I even go a bit smaller, play with what does 30 look like. And I may even like shrink it a little bit. I may want to like go, yeah, this is starting to look pretty good. I may even do flip to the left and to the right. I may try to like mess with that. So margin left, maybe like, I don't know, 15 or something like that. And then a margin right, 15 as well. Let's see how that looks. That'll make it just a little bit more compact of a button. I think and then that starts to look a little bit more natural to me. I even want this to maybe even be bigger, because I like the way that this really large number looks, because that's the point of our app. It's got this count. So yeah, that's starting to look better. Okay, so hopefully, I think I'm gonna finish things up for today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about CSS, a little bit about app layout, a little bit about kind of organizing your content, and some different approaches to like layout design. We still have some work to do here with some of these buttons, I think, but I would kind of leave that up to you if you wanted to take this example further. I'll try to wrap up this example so that if you wanted to look at it this week, I'll have it done. And then next time, which I think will be our last session, we'll try to finish up this simple app by making it actually increment up and down. So you can see it's responding to us clicking or tapping if we actually had it, sort of put on the phone itself. But we want to make these clicks actually do something. So the reset should put this to 0. The plus and minus should make the number go up and down. And then maybe we'll even get to implement close and add count, which will make new windows possibly, that we can store multiple numbers. But I think that's it for this week. I hope you learned something new or valuable doing this kind of stuff. Thanks everyone for joining. I really, really appreciate it. So.
Thank you, Paige. That was great.
Awesome. Yeah, great. I'm glad. Yeah. Again, please, please reach out in office hours. Please come to my office hours every Monday, 6:30 to 8:30. If you have any questions, if you want to, if you feel like you've been a little bit behind because you didn't go to the other sessions, we also have good news because we'll be starting a new workshop soon, I think on databases, if that's correct, Celeste. I think that's still the plan. So, even if you missed this one, you can maybe learn about databases and using SQL or SQL. So get ready for that one to start. But thanks again, everyone, and enjoy your evening.
Have a good night.